Good evening, and welcome to Whispers of History, where legends unfold slowly and sleep comes softly. Whispers of time, carried on the ancient winds, tell us a story not forged in dusty annals, but born of shimmering myth and enduring legend. It's the tale of a city, destined for greatness, whose very foundation was woven from the impossible. Imagine, if you will, twin brothers, innocent and divine, cast adrift upon the flowing heart of the Tiber. Their mother, a sacred vestal, their father, none other than the untamed god of war, Mars himself. A jealous hand, trembling with fear of their destined power, had condemned them to the river's depths. But destiny, it seems, has a will of its own. The gentle currents, as if guided by an unseen hand, bore them to a tranquil shore, the very soil where Rome would one day rise. There, a she-wolf, fierce yet tender, found the abandoned babes, offering them the lifeblood of her wild nature. Later, a kind shepherd, Faustulus, discovered them and raised them as his own sons. As they blossomed into strong, ambitious young men, the whispers of their royal lineage reached their ears. A new vision ignited within them, to build a settlement, a beacon, on the very banks that had cradled their infancy. But ambition, like a flickering flame, can ignite rivalry. The brothers quarreled, a fatal disagreement over the sacred boundaries of their nascent dream. In a moment forever etched into the fabric of Roman history, Romulus struck down Remus. He alone would found the city. On what we now know as the Palatine Hill, in the year 753 BCE, a date that would become the very anchor of Roman chronology, Romulus, with a sacred plough, marked the sacred line of his new creation. The early settlement was humble, a cluster of thatched roofs gazing out over the Tiber, overshadowed by the advanced Etruscan cities to the north and the flourishing Greek colonies to the south. Romulus, a man of fierce pragmatism, understood the need for strength. He offered asylum, a safe haven to the outcasts, the exiles, the forgotten souls from the surrounding lands. His community swelled, but a new challenge emerged. A glaring shortage of women. Romulus, ever resourceful, devised a bold, if controversial solution: the infamous rape of the Sabine women. Neighbors, the Sabines, were invited to a grand festival. Amidst the revelry, Roman men, on a prearranged signal, abducted their daughters as brides. A shocking act, yes, but one that cemented the community and created the foundational families of Rome. For nearly 2.5 centuries after Romulus, Rome was shaped by the hands of kings. 7 monarchs in succession guided the city's nascent steps, transforming it from a collection of villages into a burgeoning regional power. The tapestry of early Rome is woven with their deeds, their wisdom, and sometimes their tyranny. After the founder came Numa Pompilius, a name synonymous with wisdom and piety. He was not a warrior king, but a spiritual architect, laying the very cornerstones of Rome's profound religious traditions. It was Numa who established the revered position of Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest, and the sacred temple of Janus, whose doors, a symbol of peace, would famously only close in times of universal tranquility, a rare and cherished moment in the long saga of Rome. Then arrived Tullus Hostilius, a king of a different temperament, who understood that strength in the ancient world was often forged through conquest. He aggressively expanded Roman territory, most notably against neighboring Alba Longa. Under his rule, Rome absorbed the Alban population, a pattern of assimilation that would become a defining characteristic of Roman expansion. From this period, too, emerged the legendary combat of the Hieraci and Curiati triplets, a symbolic battle that settled the fate of two cities without the full devastation of war. Ancus Marcius, the fourth king, was a builder and a visionary. He oversaw the construction of Rome's first bridge across the Tiber, a vital link. More significantly, he founded the port city of Ostia at the river's mouth, a strategic gateway that would open up trade routes and connect Rome, then a mere village, to the vast Mediterranean world. His reign also saw the expansion of the city's boundaries to include the Janiculum Hill, providing essential defense for the growing settlement. With the fifth king, Tarquinius Priscus, a new cultural tide swept over Rome, the sophisticated influence of the Etruscans. He initiated grand public works that would define the Roman landscape for centuries, including the majestic Temple of Jupiter on the Capitoline Hill and the sprawling Circus Maximus for thrilling chariot races. It was under his rule that the massive drainage project of the Cloaca Maxima began, transforming a swampy valley into what would eventually become the vibrant heart of Rome. The Forum Servius Tullius, the sixth king, was a reformer. He implemented Rome's first constitution, a groundbreaking framework that classified citizens based on wealth and military capability. This organized structure, known as the Centuriate Assembly, would remain fundamental to Roman military and political life for centuries to come. Servius also commissioned the construction of the first true defensive wall around the entire city, a mighty embrace that encompassed the famous Seven Hills of Rome: the Palatine, Aventine, Capitoline, Quirinal, Viminal, Esquiline, and Caelian. The final king, Tarquinius Superbus, Tarquin the Proud, reigned as a tyrant. His rule saw impressive building projects, a testament to Roman ambition, including the completion of the Temple of Jupiter. But his arrogance and insatiable cruelty alienated the Roman nobility. The breaking point arrived with the horrific act committed by his son, Sextus Tarquinius, who raped Lucretia, a virtuous Roman noblewoman. This outrage ignited a rebellion, spearheaded by Lucius Junius Brutus and Lucretia's husband, Collatinus. In 509 BCE, the unthinkable happened. The monarchy was overthrown. Tarquin and his family fled into exile, and a new political entity, an audacious experiment, was born: the Roman Republic. This new system of governance, a daring departure from kingship, was explicitly designed to prevent the unchecked concentration of power that had poisoned Tarquin's reign. In place of a single monarch, two annually elected magistrates, known as consuls, assumed leadership. Each consul held the power of veto over the other's decisions, a brilliant mechanism to ensure no single individual could dominate Roman politics. Behind these consuls, lending immense wisdom and prestige, stood the Senate, a council of elders drawn from Rome's noble families. While their power was primarily advisory, their counsel carried enormous weight. The fledgling republic, however, was immediately tested. The exiled king, Tarquin, sought allies among neighboring cities, inciting powerful Etruscan lords like Lars Porsena to besiege Rome. Legend tells of Horatius Cocles, a Roman hero who single-handedly held a bridge against the advancing Etruscan army, allowing his comrades to destroy it behind him. A pivotal act of courage that saved the city from capture. Rome's internal struggles proved as formidable as its external enemies. The Republic was initially a patrician domain, controlled by hereditary nobles who held sway over both political and religious institutions. The vast majority of citizens, the plebeians, found themselves excluded from power, often trapped in cycles of debt bondage. This simmering tension between the orders would define Roman politics for centuries. The first major social crisis ignited when plebeian soldiers, the very backbone of Rome's military might, withdrew from the city to the Sacred Mount, history's first recorded general strike. This drastic action forced the patricians to concede, creating the vital office of tribune of the plebs, magistrates who could veto legislation harmful to plebeian interests. Their persons were declared sacrosanct, a sacred protection from harm. The next significant stride toward equality came with the creation of the 12 Tables, Rome's first written law code. These laws, meticulously posted in the Forum for all to see, brought unprecedented transparency to legal procedures that had previously been shrouded in secrecy and controlled by patrician elites. Though still favoring the wealthy in many respects, the 12 Tables represented a monumental step toward greater equality under the law, and cemented the crucial principle that laws should be public knowledge, accessible to all. As Rome navigated these internal challenges, it gradually expanded its influence throughout central Italy. The city engaged in numerous wars against neighboring peoples, the Volsci, Equi, Sabines, and most significantly, the Etruscans. The conquest of Veii, a wealthy Etruscan city just 12 miles north, doubled the territory under Roman control, a testament to Rome's growing military prowess. But this expansion faced a devastating setback when Celtic Gauls, fierce warriors from the north, inflicted a crushing defeat on the Roman army at the Allia River, proceeding to sack Rome itself. Most of the city lay in ruins, though a tenacious defense held out on the Capitoline Hill. Legend whispers of sacred geese in the Temple of Juno, whose honking alerted Romans to a night attack, saving the citadel from complete destruction. The Gauls eventually withdrew after receiving a ransom of gold, but the traumatic memory of this disaster would forever remain in Roman consciousness, a stark reminder of their vulnerability. Remarkably, Rome rebounded with astonishing speed from this catastrophe. The city was rebuilt, stronger walls erected, a testament to their resilience. Within decades, Rome had defeated the Latin League, incorporating these related peoples into its growing state. This expansion was characterized by a brilliant strategy. Some Latin communities received full Roman citizenship, others partial rights, establishing a system of graduated citizenship that would become a hallmark of Roman statecraft, fostering loyalty and integration. The middle years of the Republic witnessed significant political reforms that further bridged the gap between the social orders. The Licinian Sextian Laws, a landmark achievement, mandated that one consul must be a plebeian, thereby opening the highest office of the Republic to non-patricians. Over subsequent decades, plebeians gained access to virtually all major magistracies and religious offices, while wealth, rather than birth, increasingly determined political opportunity. This ongoing process of social integration helped Rome avoid the destructive class conflicts that plagued many Greek city-states. Rome's growing power inevitably brought it into conflict with other regional powers. Through 3 grueling wars against the formidable mountain peoples of central Italy, known as the Samnites, Rome relentlessly extended its control, from coast to coast across the entire Italian peninsula. This consolidation of power laid the groundwork for Rome's future dominance, As Rome solidified its position in central and southern Italy, it inevitably encountered the sophisticated Greek cities of Magna Graecia. Tarentum, the most powerful of these, felt its sovereignty threatened by Roman expansion and called for assistance from Pyrrhus, the formidable king of Epirus in Greece. Pyrrhus arrived in Italy with a formidable force, including war elephants, creatures previously unknown to the Romans, striking fear into their hearts. Despite winning several battles against Roman armies, Pyrrhus suffered such heavy casualties that these Pyrrhic victories famously depleted his forces. After an unsuccessful campaign in Sicily, Pyrrhus, recognizing the futility of his efforts, returned to Greece, leaving the Greek cities to face Rome alone. Soon after, Tarentum fell, and with it, Rome controlled the entire Italian peninsula south of the Po River. Rome's governance of this newly formed Italian confederacy demonstrated remarkable wisdom. While maintaining firm control over foreign policy and military affairs, Rome allowed its allies to retain significant local autonomy. The extension of various grades of citizenship and legal rights created powerful incentives for loyalty and integration. Roman colonies, strategically placed throughout the peninsula, served dual purposes, rewarding veterans with land, while establishing vital military outposts. This Italian alliance system would provide Rome with manpower resources that far outstripped any rival in the Mediterranean world, a decisive advantage in the epic conflicts yet to come. United Italy represented a geopolitical revolution in the ancient world, a large territorial state with centralized leadership, yet flexible enough to accommodate local diversity. Rome's attention soon turned beyond Italy, to the island of Sicily, where Carthage, a powerful maritime empire centered in North Africa, controlled the western portion of the island. The stage was set for a monumental clash, when a group of Italian mercenaries, the Mamertines, requested Roman protection against the Syracusans and Carthaginians in Sicily. Rome faced a momentous choice. Intervention would mean war with Carthage, a formidable naval power with centuries of maritime experience, a realm in which Rome was gravely lacking. Yet the Senate, with bold determination, decided to accept the Mamertines' appeal, triggering the First Punic War. This conflict forced Rome to develop naval capabilities from scratch. After early defeats, Romans captured a Carthaginian ship and meticulously used it as a template to build their own fleet. They equipped these vessels with a revolutionary innovation: the corvus, a boarding bridge that allowed Roman soldiers to transform naval combat into land warfare, utilizing their superior infantry skills. Despite catastrophic losses to storms and the brutal realities of naval combat, Roman persistence eventually prevailed. Carthage, defeated and exhausted, ceded Sicily to Rome and paid a substantial indemnity, marking Rome's emergence as a significant naval power. The Second Punic War, however, would bring Rome closer to annihilation than any conflict since the Gallic sack. The brilliant Carthaginian general, Hannibal Barca, a military genius of unparalleled cunning, led an army, complete with war elephants, from Spain, across the treacherous Alps into Italy. He inflicted 3 catastrophic defeats on Roman armies, at the Trebia River, Lake Trasimene, and most devastatingly, at Cannae, where perhaps 50,000 Romans perished in a single day, a staggering loss that sent shockwaves through the Republic. Despite these unparalleled disasters, Rome, with an unbreakable spirit, refused to surrender. While Hannibal marched through Italy, gaining allies among disaffected Roman subjects. Rome, against all odds, raised new armies. The general Quintus Fabius Maximus adopted cautious delaying tactics, famously avoiding direct confrontation, while a young, audacious commander named Scipio took the war directly to Spain, and then, with even greater daring, to Africa itself. Faced with a direct threat to Carthage itself, Hannibal, the seemingly invincible general, was finally recalled from Italy. The climactic showdown came at the Battle of Zama, where Scipio, now rightly known as Africanus, delivered a decisive defeat to Hannibal, ending the war and shattering Carthage's power. Carthage was forced to surrender its navy, its overseas territories, and its political independence, becoming a Roman tributary state. Victory over Carthage irrevocably established Rome as the dominant power in the Western Mediterranean. With the West secured, Roman attention turned eastward to the Hellenistic kingdoms that had emerged from Alexander the Great's fragmented empire. The formidable Roman legions defeated King Philip V of Macedon and subsequently overcame the Seleucid king Antiochus III at Thermopylae and Magnesia. The ancient kingdom of Macedon was divided into 4 republics under Roman supervision, a clear sign of Roman dominance. Greece itself soon came under direct Roman rule. The same year, a Third Punic War, short and brutal, ended with the complete and utter destruction of Carthage, a final act of vengeance. These relentless conquests profoundly transformed Roman society. Enormous wealth flowed into Italy from the newly acquired provinces, enriching both the state treasury and private individuals on an unprecedented scale. Slaves, captured in the vast numbers of war, became abundant, fundamentally changing the nature of Italian agriculture, as small, independent farms gave way to massive estates worked by slave labor. Many displaced rural citizens migrated to Rome, creating immense social tensions in the crowded capital. The very fabric of the Republic, designed for a small city-state, struggled to administer a vast Mediterranean empire. Governors dispatched to rule the distant provinces often exploited their positions for personal gain, a rampant corruption that eroded trust. Successful generals, commanding the fierce loyalty of their veteran troops, became potential threats to civilian authority, their power eclipsing traditional political norms. The traditional Roman values of simplicity, duty, and self-sacrifice, what Romans revered as mos maiorum, the way of the elders, seemed to wane, lost amidst a burgeoning culture of luxury and unchecked ambition. These dramatic changes set the stage for the tumultuous final century of the Republic. Tiberius Gracchus, elected tribune, bravely proposed redistributing public land to address the surging tide of rural poverty. His progressive legislation, however, provoked fierce opposition from wealthy senators, who, in a chilling act, eventually murdered him. The first political assassination in Rome for centuries, a stark harbinger of the violence to come. A mere decade later, his brother, Gaius Gracchus, met a similar tragic fate after proposing even more radical reforms, including vital grain subsidies for urban citizens. These brutal events shattered the traditional consensus of the ruling elite and irrevocably established political violence as a terrifying yet effective tool in Roman politics. In the decades that followed, ambitious generals like Marius and Sulla increasingly used their immense military power to intervene directly in political disputes, shattering civilian control. Sulla's march on Rome marked a chilling precedent. The first time a Roman general turned his own army against the sacred city itself. After defeating his rivals in a bloody civil war, Sulla had himself appointed dictator, a temporary emergency measure, but one he wielded with terrifying authority. He conducted systematic purges of his enemies through brutal proscription lists, public postings naming those to be killed and their property confiscated. Though Sulla eventually retired, his actions created a dangerous and ultimately fatal precedent for the Republic. The allure of absolute power proved irresistible. Three powerful men, Pompey, Crassus, and Julius Caesar, formed an unofficial coalition known as the First Triumvirate, a strategic alliance to dominate Roman politics. Caesar, the most ambitious and brilliant of the three, secured command in Gaul, where his legendary campaigns conquered modern France and briefly invaded Britain, earning him unprecedented wealth, vast military experience, and immense popularity among the Roman populace. When the alliance fractured, the Senate, fearing Caesar's growing power, aligned with Pompey against him. Ordered to surrender his command, Caesar, with a fateful resolve, instead crossed the Rubicon River with his loyal army, igniting civil war with the famous declaration, Alea iacta est, the die is cast. After decisively defeating Pompey's forces, Caesar became dictator of Rome, implementing numerous reforms, including the revolutionary Julian calendar. His increasing honors and a lifetime dictatorship, however, deeply alarmed the Republicans, who saw him as aspiring to monarchy, threatening the very soul of the Republic. On the Ides of March, in a shocking act of desperation, conspirators led by Brutus and Cassius assassinated Caesar in the Senate House, believing they were restoring the Republic. But rather than restoring freedom, Caesar's murder triggered renewed civil war, plunging Rome into further chaos. His adopted son, Octavian, a young man of remarkable political acumen, joined forces with Mark Antony and Lepidus in the Second Triumvirate to hunt down Caesar's killers. After defeating Brutus and Cassius at Philippi, the triumvirs ruthlessly purged their enemies and divided the Roman world among themselves. Inevitable tensions, however, soon emerged, particularly between Octavian in the west and Antony in the east, where he famously allied himself with Egypt's enigmatic queen, Cleopatra VII. The final decisive showdown came at Actium, where Octavian's forces, skillfully led by his general Agrippa, utterly defeated the combined fleet of Antony and Cleopatra. The lovers fled to Egypt, where they later committed suicide. Octavian, now the sole ruler of Rome's vast territories, learned from Caesar's mistakes. While accumulating unprecedented personal power, he meticulously maintained republican facades, referring to himself as princeps, first citizen, rather than king or dictator. The Senate, filled with his carefully cultivated supporters, awarded him the revered title Augustus, marking the effective end of the Republic and the dawn of the Roman Empire, a transformation that would shape the Western world for millennia. Augustus would rule for an astonishing 41 years, a reign of unparalleled stability that established the very patterns that would define Roman imperial governance for centuries. He meticulously reduced the massive army from 60 legions to a manageable 28, settling veterans in colonies throughout Italy and the provinces, ensuring their loyalty. He undertook sweeping reforms, a new, equitable tax system, the establishment of a postal service, the creation of firefighting cohorts. and the organization of a permanent police force in Rome, bringing order to the bustling capital. His ambitious building projects utterly transformed the capital, so much so that he famously boasted of finding Rome a city of brick and leaving it a city of marble. In foreign affairs, Augustus secured and expanded Rome's vast frontiers. Germanic tribes were pushed back beyond the Rhine, while the empire's boundary in the east was secured through skillful diplomacy with the formidable Parthian Empire. Spain was finally fully conquered after centuries of tenacious resistance, and the Danube became Rome's unwavering northern frontier in Europe. Perhaps most crucially, Augustus, without a biological son, meticulously engineered a stable system of succession, a mechanism that had tragically eluded the Republic in its final, chaotic decades. He gradually elevated his stepson, Tiberius, a capable general but a reluctant ruler, to prominence, carefully ensuring a smooth transfer of power upon his death. Tiberius began a dynasty, the Julio-Claudia NS, that would govern Rome for more than 50 years. His rule began well, but grew increasingly dark after he withdrew to the secluded island of Capri, leaving the affairs of state to the ambitious Praetorian prefect Sionis. After uncovering Sionis's treacherous plot to seize power, Tiberius launched a terrifying wave of treasonous riles that spread fear and paranoia throughout the Roman aristocracy, a chilling glimpse into the darker side of imperial power. Tiberius was succeeded by his grand minus nephew, Caligula, whose early promise quickly devolved into apparent madness. Stories of his excesses, his unpredictable cruelty, but his assassination after just 4 years of rule speaks volumes about his profound unpopularity among the Roman elite. The Praetorian Guard, the emperor's household troops, then elevated Claudius to the throne. A man's physical disabilities had led his family to sideline. Despite these perceived weaknesses, Claudius proved to be a surprisingly able and effective administrator. During his 13-year reign, he expanded the empire significantly, conquering Britain and incorporating new provinces in the east. He also extended citizenship more widely and, controversially, admitted Gauls to the Senate, recognizing that Rome's long-term future lay in provincial integration, rather than strict alien domination. The Julio-Claudian dynasty ended tragically with Nero, who began his reign promiscuously under the guidance of the philosopher Seneca and the Praetorian prefect Boris. As he asserted his independence, however, his rule grew alarmingly tyrannical. He had his mother Agrippina murdered, kicked his pregnant wife to death, and, infamously, persecuted Christians. After the Great Fire of Rome, his rising unpopularity led to revolts, and Nero, facing certain doom, committed suicide, reportedly lamenting, "Qualis artifex perio, what an artist dies in me." Nero's death ushered in a chaotic period known as the Year for Emperors. In quick succession, the generals Galba, Otho, and Vitellius each claimed the throne, only to be overthrown by military revolt. Finally, Vespasian, commanding the Eastern legions, emerged victorious from the turmoil, establishing the Flavian dynasty and bringing much needed stability back to the empire. A man of humble origins with a practical approach to governance, Vespasian, during his 10-year reign, restored fiscal responsibility after Nero's crippling extravagance. His greatest architectural legacy was the beginning of construction of the Flavian Amphitheater, better known today as the Colosseum, built on the very site of Nero's opulent palace as a grand gift to the Roman people, a symbol of public service over imperial indulgence. His eldest son, Titus, succeeded him, just months before Mount Vesuvius erupted in a cataclysmic fury, destroying the cities of Pompeii and Herculanum. Titus handled this and other disasters, including a devastating fire in Rome, with such profound compassion that he was widely mourned when he died after just 2 short years of rule, a truly beloved emperor. The final Flavian emperor was Domitian, whose 15-year reign witnessed significant military activity along the Danube frontier and in Britain. While an effective administrator, his increasingly autocratic tendencies alienated the Senate, leading to his assassination and the end of the Flavian dynasty. The Senate then, in a rare exercise of its power, selected one of its own members, the elderly Nerva, as emperor. With no natural heir and limited military support, Nerva wisely adopted the popular general Trajan as his successor, establishing a pattern of adoptive succession that would serve Rome brilliantly for nearly a century. Trajan, born in Spain, became the first emperor from outside Italy, a momentous shift. His 19-year reign saw the Roman Empire reach its greatest territorial extent, a true golden age of expansion. He conquered Dacia, roughly modern Romania, incorporating its rich gold mines into the empire. His most ambitious campaign annexed Armenia, Mesopotamia, and parts of Parthia, briefly extending Roman rule to the Persian Gulf. Though some of these eastern conquests would be abandoned by his successor, they represented the high watermark of Roman expansion. Beyond military glory, Trajan was celebrated for his domestic policies. His extensive building programs included a massive forum in Rome, a testament to his vision, and numerous projects throughout the provinces. He established the Alimente, a groundbreaking welfare program providing support for poor children in Italy, and was generally regarded, even by later Romans, as the Optimus Princeps, the optimal emperor, against whom all others were measured. On his deathbed, Trajan may have adopted his relative Hadrian, though some suspected the adoption was fabricated by Hadrian's supporters. Regardless, Hadrian became emperor and immediately shifted imperial policy. Recognizing that the empire had reached its practical limits, he withdrew from Trajan's ambitious eastern conquests and focused instead on consolidation rather than expansion. Hadrian spent more than half his 21-year reign traveling throughout the provinces, often walking on foot with his troops while meticulously inspecting frontier defenses. In Britain, he ordered the construction of a massive wall spanning the island's narrow northern waist, creating a formidable barrier against tribal incursions that stands partially intact today. Similar frontier works were strengthened throughout the empire, establishing clear boundaries in place of continued expansion. A lover of Greek culture, who famously wore a beard in the Hellenic fashion unlike his clean-shaven predecessors, Hadrian spent extensive time in Athens, completing the massive temple of Olympian Zeus, begun centuries earlier. His architectural legacy in Rome included the breathtaking Pantheon, with its revolutionary concrete dome, a structural marvel still standing today as testament to Roman engineering brilliance. Hadrian's chosen successor, Antoninus Pius, ruled for 23 remarkably peaceful years. His reign saw no major wars or internal disturbances, allowing the empire to prosper in an era of rare tranquility. Continuing the tradition of adoption, Antoninus selected Marcus Aurelius as his heir, with the insightful provision that Marcus in turn adopt Lucius Verus as co-emperor, ensuring a shared burden of leadership. Marcus Aurelius, a devoted Stoic philosopher whose meditations remain widely read today, found his reign tragically dominated by relentless military challenges despite his philosophical nature. Germanic tribes, possibly pushed westward by population movements deeper in Europe and Asia, began pressing against Roman frontiers on the Danube in greater numbers than ever before. While Marcus and Lucius initially ruled jointly, Lucius's untimely death left Marcus in Sulcum and during increasingly difficult times. Beyond external threats, the empire faced a devastating pandemic known as the Antonine Plague, possibly smallpox, brought back by troops from campaigns in the east. This catastrophic disease killed perhaps 5 million people throughout Roman territories, severely weakening both military and economic strength at a critical juncture. Despite these immense challenges, Marcus Aurelius steadfastly maintained the frontiers and even planned to create new provinces beyond the Danube before his death. Unlike his predecessors who chose the most qualified successor through adoption, Marcus made a fateful decision. He allowed his biological son Commodus to succeed him, a choice that would have dire consequences for Rome. As Marcus Aurelius drew his final breath on the Danubian frontier, none could foresee that this golden age was, in fact, ending. The accession of Commodus would mark the beginning of troubles that would test the resilience of the imperial system in ways its creators never imagined. Yet the achievements of the early empire would echo through the centuries, creating an ideal of peace, prosperity, and good governance that would inspire civilizations long after Rome itself had fallen. This -century span, from Augustus to Marcus Aurelius, represents the Roman Empire at its zenith. The population reached perhaps 70 million people, living in relative security under the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. A vast network of roads, totaling over 250,000 miles, facilitated unparalleled trade, communication, and military movement throughout the Mediterranean basin and beyond. Cities flourished with public amenities unknown in earlier ages: aqueducts delivering fresh water, public baths, theaters, and forums. Roman law, increasingly sophisticated and humane, was administered across 3 continents, a testament to its enduring power. Literature and art thrived during this period as well. Virgil's epic poem, the Aeneid, Ovid's Metamorphosms, the histories of Tacitus, the biographies of Suetonius, and the letters of Pliny the Younger all date from this era, contributing to a rich cultural tapestry. While innovations in science lagged behind literary achievements, practical knowledge in fields like architecture, engineering, agriculture, and medicine made daily life for Romans more comfortable than for any large population before them. Perhaps most significantly, this period saw the birth and early spread of Christianity. Jesus of Nazareth lived and died during the reign of Tiberius, and the new religion slowly spread throughout the empire despite sporadic persecution. By the time of Marcus Aurelius, Christian communities existed in most major cities, laying foundations for developments that would transform the later empire. The early empire also witnessed the increasing importance of the provinces. Italy gradually lost its privileged position as emperors from Spain and beyond assumed the purple. Citizenship was gradually extended more widely, culminating generations later in its grant to all free inhabitants of the empire. Trade networks connected distant regions, with goods flowing from as far as India and China into Roman markets. This remarkable era of stability and prosperity rested on several crucial pillars: the Augustan settlement that skillfully balanced imperial power with respect for tradition, the adoption system that consistently produced a series of capable rulers, frontiers secure enough to prevent major invasions, and an economy that, despite its limitations by modern standards, generated sufficient surplus to maintain urban civilization and a formidable standing army of nearly 400,000 men. As Marcus Aurelius drew his final breath on the Danubian frontier, none could foresee that this golden age was, in fact, ending. The accession of Commodus would mark the beginning of troubles that would test the resilience of the imperial system in ways its creators never imagined. Yet the achievements of the early empire would echo through the centuries, creating an ideal of peace, prosperity, and good governance that would inspire civilizations long after Rome itself had fallen. The golden age of the Roman Empire, shimmering and grand, began to dim as Commodus assumed the purple following the death of Marcus Aurelius. Unlike his philosophical father, Commodus had little interest in the burdens, a mart of governance. Handsome and athletic, he preferred the roar of the gladiatorial arena to the quiet calculations of the council chamber. He often fought in staged combats, charging the imperial treasury enormous sums for his appearances, and boasting of thousands of victories against opponents who, fearing his wrath, dared not defeat him. While Commodus indulged his bizarre fantasies, even renaming Rome Colonia Commodiana and styling himself as the reincarnation of Hercules, the vast machinery of empire continued functioning through the tireless efforts of experienced administrators. Yet his capricious executions of senators and officials created a chilling climate of fear that pervaded the capital. On the final day of the year, he was strangled in his bath by his wrestling partner, Narcissus, part of a desperate plot involving his inner circle who feared they would be next to face his unpredictable wrath. After Commodus' assassination, the venerable General Perdiccans was elevated to the throne by the Senate, a respected choice. However, his attempts to restore discipline among the notoriously unruly Praetorian Guard proved fatally unpopular. They murdered him after just 3 months, when he refused their outrageous demands for a special bonus. What followed was perhaps the most shameful episode in Roman history. The Praetorians literally auctioned the empire to the highest bidder. Didius Julianus, a wealthy senator, won this dubious honor, but his reign lasted only 66 days, a fleeting mockery of imperial power. Provincial armies, disgusted by the scandalous events in Rome, swiftly put forward their own commanders as imperial candidates, plunging the empire into renewed civil war. From this chaos emerged Septimus Severus, the formidable commander of the Pannonian legions, who marched on Rome, disbanded the disgraced Praetorians, and established a new dynasty, the Severan. Severus was a capable soldier who secured his position through a combination of relentless military victories and the ruthless elimination of rivals. Born in Leptis Magna in North Africa, he was the first emperor from that continent and spoke Latin with a distinct accent, marking a shift in the empire's power base. His reign brought significant changes to Roman governance, particularly the increasing militarization of the administration and a greater reliance on equestrians, rather than senators for key positions. During his 18-year rule, Severus conducted successful campaigns in the east against the Parthian Empire, creating the new province of Mesopotamia with its rich farmlands. He also traveled to Britain to strengthen Hadrian's Walland campaign against the Caledonians in Scotland, extending Roman influence. It was there, in the northern outpost of Ebe, or modern York, that he died, reportedly advising his sons to enrich the soldiers and scorn everyone else, a stark summary of his priorities. Those sons, Caracalla and Geta, were intended to rule jointly, but their deep-seated hatred for each other made cooperation impossible. Within a year, Caracalla had his brother murdered in their mother's arms, and immediately ordered a Dematio Memoriae, ruthlessly erasing Geta from official records and monuments, a chilling attempt to blot him from history. Caracalla then embarked on a reign of terror against his brother's supporters. Despite his cruelty, Caracalla issued one of the most significant edicts in Roman history, the Constitutio Antoniniana, granting Roman citizenship to all free men within the empire. While partially motivated by a desire to increase tax revenue, this decree formalized the evolution of Rome from city-state to a universal empire, where citizenship was defined by law rather than ethnic origin. Caracalla was ultimately assassinated while campaigning in the east, stabbed to death by a soldier as he relieved himself along a road a crude end for an autocratic ruler. The Severan dynasty continued through a series of rulers connected by the remarkable women of the family, particularly Julia Mazae, sister-in-law of Septimus Severus, who skillfully engineered the rise of her grandsons, Elagabalus and later Alexander Severus. Elagabalus scandalized Rome with his religious devotion to the Eastern sun god whose name he bore, attempting to make this exotic cult supreme over traditional Roman worship. His alleged effeminacy, including reports that he married a male charioteer, further alienated traditional Romans. After 4 years of his bizarre reign, the Praetorians murdered him and threw his body into the Tiber, a final act of disgust. Alexander Severus, just 13 when he ascended the throne, ruled under the regency of his capable mother, Julia Mazae. His 13-year reign attempted to restore good relations with the Senate and traditional Roman values, but military challenges were mounting on all sides. A new aggressive Persian dynasty, the Sassanids, had replaced the Parthians and posed a greater threat in the east. Meanwhile, Germanic tribes increased pressure on the Rhine and Danube frontiers, ever seeking entry into the empire. When Alexander, seeking a peaceful resolution, negotiated with Germanic tribes rather than fighting them, his disgruntled troops mutinied and proclaimed Maximinus Thrax, the giant former shepherd from Thrace, as emperor. Maximinus represented a new type of emperor, a hardened soldier of humble origins, with little education or refinement, who rose through military merit alone. Though an effective general, his harsh taxation, levied to fund his military campaigns, made him deeply unpopular with civilians. The Senate, desperate to restore their dwindling influence, supported a revolt led by the elderly Governor Gordian and his son in Africa. When they were quickly defeated, the Senate, in a bold move, appointed 2 of their own members, Pupienus and Albinus, as co-minus emperors. Maximinus marched on Italy, but was murdered by his own troops as they besieged Aquileia. The Senate's appointees were themselves soon killed by the Praetorian Guard, who, in another twist of fate, elevated the 13-year-old Gordian III, grandson of the earlier claimant. This dizzying sequence of emperors and usurpers inaugurated what historians call the crisis of the 3rd century. Over the next few decades, at least 26 men claimed the imperial title, most ruling for just a few years before meeting violent ends. The Roman world seemed to be unraveling as the imperial office became the prize in an endless, destructive military lottery. External threats compounded the internal chaos. The Emperor Decius and his son tragically died fighting Goths at the Battle of Abridas, the first Roman emperor to fall in battle against foreign enemies. The Emperor Valerian suffered an even worse fate, captured alive by the Sassanid Persian king Shai, pariah and allegedly used as a human footstool before being skinned after death and stuffed as a grotesque trophy, a horrifying humiliation for Rome. With central authority collapsing, the empire began to fragment. In the west, a Gallic empire encompassing Gaul, Britain, and parts of Spain broke away under a succession of local rulers. In the east, the desert trading city of Palmyra, under the formidable Queen Zenobia, established control over provinces from Egypt to Asia Minor. Economic crisis accompanied this political disintegration, as the currency was repeatedly debased to pay the armies, triggering severe inflation that crippled the economy. It seemed Rome's thousand-year story might be approaching its end. Yet even in this darkest hour, resilient structures and capable individuals emerged to pull the empire back from the brink. The turning point came with the accession of Claudius II Gothicus. In his brief 2-year reign, he defeated Gothic invaders in the Balkans so decisively that he earned the title Gothicus. Though he died of plague, his work was continued by Aurelian, acclaimed by his troops following Claudius's death. Aurelian's 5-year reign earned him the magnificent title Restorer of the World. He decisively defeated the Pommeranian Empire, bringing Queen Zenobia to Rome in golden chains for his triumph. He then recovered the breakaway Gallic provinces, reunifying the fragmented empire. To protect Rome itself from barbarian raids, he built a massive new walled circuit that still stands partially intact today. He reformed the currency and established an official sun cult that attempted to provide religious unity. Aurelian's assassination, based on a secretary's false claim that the emperor planned to execute several officers, threatened to unravel his hard-1 achievements. Several short-lived emperors followed before Carus established a brief dynasty. While campaigning successfully against Persia, Carus allegedly died when his tent was struck by lightning. Though assassination remains possible, his son Numerian was murdered by his praetorian prefect Aper while returning from the Persian campaign. At Numerian's funeral, the assembled officers acclaimed Diocletian, a cavalry commander of humble Dalmatian origin, as emperor. Diocletian immediately executed Aper personally, fulfilling a prophecy that he would become emperor after killing the boar, Aper in Latin. With Diocletian's accession, the crisis period finally ended. Though the empire had survived, it was profoundly transformed. The old Augustan Principate, with its careful balance of republican forms and imperial power, was gone. In its place stood a more overtly autocratic system, where the emperor was increasingly seen as a remote, sacred figure, rather than first among equals. Military needs now dominated all aspects of governance. The army had nearly doubled in size to face multiple frontier threats, consuming an ever larger share of the state's resources. Taxation had grown heavier and more systematic to support these forces. The distinction between Italy and the provinces had largely vanished, as the entire empire shouldered similar burdens. Yet despite the trauma of the 3rd century crisis, important cultural developments continued. This period saw the rise of Neoplatonism through philosophers like Plotinus, whose mystical vision of reality would deeply influence later Christian thought. Christianity itself spread widely during these troubled decades, offering spiritual solace and community in uncertain times. The religion that had once been a persecuted minority was becoming a major force in Roman society. Roman law continued to evolve, with jurists like Ulpian and Papinian refining legal concepts that would influence civilizations far beyond Rome's eventual fall. Despite economic difficulties, Roman engineering still produced remarkable works, from Aurelian's walls to public buildings throughout the provinces. As the 3rd century closed, the empire that Diocletian inherited was wounded, but not defeated. The coming reforms would reshape Rome's government completely, creating a new imperial system capable of meeting the challenges of a changing world. The transition from the early empire of Augustus to the late Roman world was complete, a transformation forged in the crucible of crisis and recovery. As Diocletian stood victorious after claiming the purple, the Roman world lay exhausted from a half-century of crisis. Drawing profound lessons from this turmoil, the new emperor would reshape imperial governance more dramatically than anyone since Augustus. Born to a humble family in Dalmatia on the Adriatic coast, Diocletian had risen through military service without the benefit of aristocratic connections. This outsider's perspective perhaps allowed him to see more clearly the systemic problems facing Rome. The empire had grown too vast and complex for a single ruler to manage effectively. Military emergencies on one frontier often required the emperor's presence, just as crises erupted elsewhere, making unified command impossible. Recognizing this stark reality, Diocletian took the unprecedented step of appointing a co-emperor. He elevated his trusted fellow officer Maximian to the rank of Augustus, assigning him responsibility for the western provinces while Diocletian himself focused on the vital east. This initial division, however, proved insufficient for the empire's vast needs. So Diocletian expanded the imperial college further by appointing two junior emperors, called Caesars Galerius in the east and Constantius Chlorus in the west. This revolutionary system, known as the tetrarchy, or rule of four, fundamentally divided administrative responsibilities, while meticulously maintaining the fiction of a unified empire. Each tetrarch governed a quarter of Roman territory from his own designated capital city, as Rome itself, once the undisputed heart of the empire, now lost its central role. The arrangement ingeniously included a plan for orderly succession after 20 years. The senior August would voluntarily retire, allowing the Caesars to be promoted and select new junior colleagues. This meticulous mechanism aimed, finally, to prevent the devastating succession crises that had plagued the 3rd century. Beyond restructuring imperial leadership, Diocletian embarked on a sweeping reorganization of the empire's administrative geography. Provinces were subdivided into smaller, more manageable units, nearly doubling their number. These smaller provinces were then grouped into 12 dioceses, themselves organized into prefectures, corresponding to each tetrarch's territory. This tiered arrangement created multiple layers of oversight, intended to reduce corruption and improve efficiency. The military underwent a similar, radical reorganization. Diocletian fundamentally separated civil and military authority, which had traditionally been combined in provincial governors, reducing the risk of local rebellion. He substantially increased the size of the army to address multiple frontier threats simultaneously. To further limit the power of potentially rebellious generals, he reduced the size of provincial armies while creating a crucial central mobile reserve that could rapidly respond to crises anywhere in the empire. These expanded military and administrative structures, while effective, required far greater resources. Diocletian implemented a comprehensive census to accurately identify taxable wealth and individuals throughout the empire. His new tax system required payment in kind produce and goods, rather than increasingly worthless currency, with set quotas collected from each region, ensuring a stable supply for the armies in the state. To ensure essential services continued, Diocletian even mandated hereditary occupations for certain vital professions, binding sons to follow their father's trades, a measure that brought stability, but also restricted individual freedom. While these reforms undeniably stabilized the empire, they came at the significant cost of increased state control over individual lives. The relatively free market economy of the early empire gave way to a more regulated system where the state's needs took precedence over private initiative. The distinction between honestai, or as the privileged, and humilio res, the lower classes, became more pronounced, with different legal standards applied to each. Diocletian also attempted to address rampant economic instability through his infamous edict on maximum prices, which set price ceilings for thousands of goods and services throughout the empire. Though well-intentioned, this measure proved impossible to enforce and was ultimately abandoned. In religious matters, Diocletian initially showed tolerance, but later launched what became known as the Great Persecution against Christians. This final and most severe attempt to suppress Christianity included the destruction of churches, confiscation of scripture, and the execution of clergy. Despite its intensity, the persecution varied by region and ultimately failed to halt Christianity's relentless spread. True to his succession plan, Diocletian took the unprecedented step of voluntarily retiring, compelling his co-Augustus Maximian to do the same. He spent his remaining years cultivating cabbages at his magnificent palace in Split on the Dalmatian coast, reportedly telling visitors that only someone who had been emperor could truly understand the pleasures of retirement. The carefully designed tetrarchy system, however, collapsed almost immediately after its creator's retirement. The succession plans were undermined by dynastic sentiment as troops, loyal to their families, proclaimed Constantius Chlorus and Maxentius, son of Maximian, as emperors. The following years saw complex power struggles as various claimants fought for supremacy. Constantine, a man of profound ambition and strategic brilliance, emerged victorious from these brutal conflicts. According to Christian tradition, before the crucial battle of the Milvian Bridge against Maxentius, Constantine saw a vision of a cross in the sky, with the words in hoc signo vinces in this sign, conquer. Whether motivated by genuine conversion or shrewd political calculation, Constantine's embrace of Christianity would utterly transform the Roman world. The Edict of Milan, issued jointly with his eastern colleague Licinius, formally ended the persecution of Christians and restored their confiscated property. Though not making Christianity the official state religion, the edict granted it legal status and imperial favor, marking a pivotal turning point for the burgeoning faith. Constantine later defeated Licinius to become sole ruler of a reunited empire, solidifying his unique position. Perhaps Constantine's most consequential decision was founding a new capital on the site of the ancient Greek city of Byzantium. Dedicated as Constantinople, it occupied an unparalleled strategic position, controlling the vital strait between Europe and Asia. This new Christian city, free from Rome's pagan associations, would serve as the imperial capital for over 1,000 years, a testament to its enduring power and significance. Constantine maintained many of Diocletian's administrative reforms while softening their harsher aspects. He created a new gold currency, the solidus, which maintained its value for centuries, bringing much-needed monetary stability after decades of inflation. His religious policies carefully favored Christians without directly suppressing traditional worship, beginning a gradual transition that would accelerate dramatically under his successors. After Constantine's death, the empire passed to his three surviving sons, Constantine II, Constantius II, and Constans. Their reigns were tragically marked by fratricidal conflict and continuing religious tensions, particularly surrounding the Arian controversy about Christ's divine nature. Constantius I eventually emerged as sole emperor, ruling until his death. The brief reign of Julian the Apostate, Constantine's nephew, marked the last serious attempt to restore traditional Roman religion. Raised as a Christian, but secretly converting to paganism, Julian sought to revitalize classical culture and reduce Christian privileges during his 18-month rule. His death fighting the Persians abruptly ended this religious counter-revolution. The emperors who followed Julian steadfastly maintained Christianity's favored position. Under Theodosius I, Christianity became the official state religion of the Roman Empire, a momentous shift. The Edict of Thessalonica formally established Nicene Christianity as the empire's sole legitimate faith, while subsequent edicts systematically closed pagan temples and prohibited traditional sacrifices. The millennium-old religious traditions that had sustained Rome since its founding were now officially abandoned, forever altering the empire's spiritual landscape. Theodosius faced significant external challenges beyond religious matters. His predecessor Valens had suffered a catastrophic defeat at Adrianople against Gothic forces, with perhaps 2/3 of the Eastern Field Army destroyed, and Valens himself killed. A stark demonstration of the growing military threat posed by Germanic peoples seeking land within the empire. Rather than attempting to expel these Goths, Theodosius pragmatically settled them within imperial territory as foederati, allied troops serving under their own leaders while acknowledging Roman sovereignty. This pragmatic solution provided needed manpower, but also increased the influence of semi-autonomous Germanic groups within Roman borders. The late Roman military relied increasingly on such allied contingents and recruited heavily among Germanic peoples for regular units as well. While the stereotype of effete Romans hiring barbarians to fight their battles is oversimplified, many Romans still served, and many barbarians were thoroughly Romanized. The army's ethnic composition changed significantly from earlier centuries. Social and economic developments during this period reflected the empire's profound transformation. Christianity reshaped cultural values, emphasizing otherworldly salvation over classical civic virtues. The urban middle classes, once the vibrant backbone of Roman society, declined as imperial service and vast agricultural estates dominated economic life. Cities themselves shrank within defensive walls as their magnificent classical monuments were cannibalized for building material or converted to Christian use, a visible sign of changing priorities. Yet amid these profound changes, remarkable cultural achievements continued to flourish. This era saw the flowering of patristic literature as Christian thinkers like Ambrose, Jerome, and Augustine developed sophisticated theological and philosophical systems that would profoundly influence Western thought for centuries. In law, the Theodosian Code compiled imperial legislation, creating a systematic legal reference that preserved Roman jurisprudence for future generations. Despite economic difficulties, Roman engineering still produced remarkable works, from Aurelian's walls to public buildings throughout the provinces. Upon Theodosius' death, the empire was divided between his sons Arcadius in the east and Honorius in the west. Though theoretically temporary, this division would prove permanent. While the eastern and western courts maintained the fiction of a unified empire, they increasingly pursued separate interests and faced fundamentally different challenges. The eastern half, wealthier and better protected geographically, would endure for another 1,000 years as what modern historians call the Byzantine Empire. Though its citizens continued to proudly call themselves Romans, the western half faced existential challenges that would lead to its collapse within a single lifetime. As the 4th century closed, the transformed Roman state bore little resemblance to the Principate of Augustus. The emperor now ruled as an Oriental-style monarch, addressed as Dominus, Lord, rather than Princeps, first citizen. Officials bowed before the imperial presence, which was increasingly secluded behind elaborate court ceremonial, emphasizing the emperor's divine, untouchable status. Christianity had irrevocably displaced traditional religion, altering fundamental assumptions about society and human purpose. Yet for all these changes, the essential continuity of Roman governance remained. The empire still controlled roughly the same territories as under the Antonines. Latin and Greek remained the languages of administration. Roman law still regulated daily life. Citizens still identified as Romans, even as what that identity meant evolved with changing circumstances. The stage was now set for the final act of the Western Empire's long drama. As Germanic pressure on the frontiers increased and internal resources dwindled, the Western emperors would face challenges that would ultimately prove insurmountable. The coming century would witness the end of direct Roman rule in the West, even as the eastern half adapted and survived. As the 5th century dawned, the Roman world stood divided between the sons of Theodosius. While technically ruling a single empire, Arcadius in Constantinople and Honorius in Milan presided over increasingly separate realms. Both young emperors relied heavily on powerful, ambitious advisors, Rufinus in the east and Stilicho in the west. The resulting court intrigues would tragically weaken imperial authority at precisely the moment when Rome faced its greatest external challenge. The ominous catalyst for the coming crisis was the seismic arrival of the Huns from the vast Eurasian steppes. Their westward migration pushed Germanic peoples against and ultimately across the Roman frontiers in unprecedented and overwhelming numbers. The most immediate threat came from the Goths, who, after the death of their leader Aphra-I-Tigeren, united under an ambitious new king named Alaric. Alaric's Goths settled within the empire as foederati. Since their victory at Adrianople, felt profoundly mistreated by imperial authorities. When their demands for better terms were fiercely rebuffed, they revolted and began moving relentlessly through the Balkans, alternately negotiating with unthreatening both Eastern and Western imperial courts. Stilicho, himself of partial Vandal ancestry, but thoroughly Roman in culture and loyalty, handled the Gothic threat with a masterful combination of military action and shrewd diplomacy. However, his efforts were constantly undermined by suspicion from both imperial courts, each fearing he sought to control the entire empire for himself. After Stilicho's execution on trumped-minus up charges of treason, the Western Empire lost its most capable defender, its last hope for unified resistance. With Stilicho gone, Alaric saw his opportunity. He invaded Italy and accomplished what had not happened in 8 centuries, the unthinkable sack of Rome itself. Though the Goths remained in the city only 3 days and the damage was relatively contained, the psychological impact on the Roman world was immense, shattering the illusion of Rome's invincibility. Jerome, writing in Bethlehem, lamented that the bright light of all the world was put out and the whole world perished in one city. After Alaric's death shortly after the sack, the Goths moved into Gaul and eventually settled in Aquitaine as Roman federates, a precarious agreement. Meanwhile, other Germanic peoples, driven by the same Hunny sea pressure, had crossed the frozen Rhine during a particularly harsh winter, pouring into Gaul and eventually Spain. These included Vandals, Sueves, and Alans, who swiftly established their own territories within nominally Roman provinces, further fragmenting the Western Empire. The Western imperial government, now based in Ravenna for better security than vulnerable Rome, struggled desperately to respond to these multiple, overwhelming incursions. Increasingly, real power rested not with the emperor, but with the Magister Militum, the master of soldiers, the supreme military commander. For nearly 2 decades, that vital position was held by Flavius Sadius. sometimes reverently called the last of the Romans. While Aetius bravely worked to maintain what remained of Roman authority in Gaul, a new and devastating threat emerged in North Africa. The Vandals, under their cunning king Gaius Eric, crossed from Spain to Africa, conquering the wealthy provinces that had long supplied Rome with its essential grain. By seizing Carthage, they established a powerful kingdom and built a formidable fleet that would dominate the western Mediterranean, crippling Rome's food supply and naval power. As these permanent settlements of Germanic peoples within the empire were unfolding, the Western Empire faced its most fearsome opponent, Attila the Hun. Having already ravaged the eastern provinces and decisively defeated imperial armies, Attila turned westward, invading Gaul with terrifying speed. Aetius, in a desperate act of strategic brilliance, cobbled together a diverse coalition of Roman forces and Germanic federates, including the crucial Visigoths, that bravely confronted the Hunnic army at the epic Battle of the Catalan Union Plains. This desperate defense, a clash of empires, halted Attila's advance in Gaul, saving the region from complete devastation. The following year, Attila, undeterred, invaded Italy. Rome itself seemed doomed, poised for a second sack, until an embassy led by Pope Leo I somehow persuaded the Hun to withdraw. While later accounts would attribute this to divine intervention, practical factors likely included widespread disease in Attila's army, severe food shortages in ravaged Italy, and possibly substantial bribes from Constantinople. Attila's death shortly after this campaign and the subsequent swift collapse of Hunnic power gave Rome a brief, much-needed respite. That same year, however, devastating court intrigue led to the murder of Aetius on the explicit orders of Emperor Valentinian, a fatal blunder that deprived the West of its last great general. The emperor himself was assassinated by Aetius's supporters months later, ending the Theodosian dynasty in the West and plunging the empire into further chaos. What followed was a rapid succession of short-lived emperors, many mere puppets of powerful military commanders. Majorian, who ruled for just a few years, represented the last serious attempt to restore Roman power in the West. His valiant efforts to rebuild the military and recover North Africa from the Vandals ended with his defeat and execution, signaling the definitive end of Western imperial ambition. After Majorian, Western emperors controlled little beyond Italy itself, with various Germanic kingdoms establishing effective independence in former Roman provinces. In Spain, the Suevi controlled the northwest, while Visigoths expanded their territory from Aquitaine. In Gaul, Burgundians ruled the southeast, while Franks gradually increased their power in the north. Britain, abandoned by imperial forces decades earlier, had already developed its own distinctive post-Roman society, increasingly influenced by Anglo-Saxon settlers. By the later decades of the 5th century, the Western emperors had become irrelevant to most of the former provinces, their authority a mere shadow. Real power in Italy rested with the powerful military commander Ricimer, and after his death, with his successors Gundobad, and finally Orestes. Orestes, seeking to maintain a semblance of legitimacy, installed his young son Romulus as emperor, though the boy exercised no actual authority, becoming known to history as Romulus Augustulus, Little Augustus. Germanic troops in Italy, mainly from the Syrian and Herulian tribes, demanded permanent land grants similar to those given to federates in other provinces. When Orestes refused, they rallied behind Odoacer, a shrewd German officer in Roman service. Odoacer swiftly overthrew Orestes and, in a symbolic act, deposed Romulus, ending the charade of imperial rule in the West. In a pragmatic solution, Odoacer sent the imperial regalia to Emperor Zeno in Constantinople, signaling that a separate Western emperor was unnecessary. He requested and received the title of patrician, governing Italy nominally as Zeno's viceroy, but effectively as an independent king. Romulus, still a teenager, was permitted to retire to a country estate with a generous pension, an unexpectedly merciful end for a deposed ruler. This moment, 476 CE, is traditionally marked as the fall of Rome, or more accurately, the end of the Western Roman Empire. Yet for people living through these events, there was no dramatic, cataclysmic collapse. Many of the structures of Roman life continued under new management. Germanic kings issued laws based on Roman models, maintained some form of tax system, and often employed Roman administrators, integrating into the existing framework rather than destroying it. Several crucial factors contributed to the Western Empire's failure to withstand the relentless pressures that its eastern counterpart successfully navigated. The West faced more exposed land frontiers and more frequent, devastating invasions. Its economy had been less urbanized and more agrarian than the East's, making it less resilient to shocks. Even in better times, the wealthy provinces of North African parts of Gaul that had sustained Western finances were lost to Vandals and Visigoths, creating a spiral of declining resources that choked the empire's ability to resist. Western emperors also suffered from a critical deficit of legitimacy compared to their Eastern colleagues. The constant civil wars and rapid turnover of rulers undermined confidence in imperial authority, eroding the very bedrock of loyalty. After the sack of Rome, the psychological foundation of empire that deeply held belief in Rome's eternal destiny was severely damaged in the West, replaced by a sense of vulnerability and impending doom. Yet even as direct imperial rule faded, Romanate as Roman culture and identity endured. Latin remained the language of administration and literacy, shaping the evolving languages of Europe. The Catholic Church, in its nascent form, preserved Roman organizational structures and legal concepts, becoming a powerful continuity. Aqueducts still carried water, and people still gathered in forums, even as new Germanic lords ruled from former imperial palaces, adapting rather than destroying Roman infrastructure. The end of the Western Empire did not mean the end of the Roman world. In the East, the empire continued to flourish from its magnificent capital at Constantinople. The Emperor Zeno and his successors proudly considered themselves the legitimate rulers of the entire Roman world, including the lost western provinces that they hoped to someday recover. In Italy itself, Odoacer's rule would prove brief. Emperor Zeno authorized Theodoric, king of the Ostrogoths, to invade Italy and depose Odoacer. After defeating and eventually murdering his rival, Theodoric established a kingdom that represented one of the most successful syntheses of Roman and Germanic elements in the post-imperial West, a new cultural blend. As the Western provinces began their gradual transformation into what would eventually become medieval Europe, the idea of Rome retained its powerful grip on the imagination. Germanic kings sought recognition from Constantinople and coveted Roman titles, acknowledging the enduring prestige of the empire. The Church increasingly filled the administrative vacancy left by imperial retreat, becoming a crucial social and political force. And far to the east, the Roman Empire, now Greek-speaking and Christian, but still calling itself Roman, continued to uphold the magnificent legacy of Augustus and Constantine, a living flame of Roman continuity. The end of the Western Roman Empire thus marks not a cataclysmic collapse, but a significant transition point in a much longer process of transformation. The political structure created by Augustus 5 centuries earlier had finally failed in the West. But Roman civilization, like a great river dividing around an obstacle, would continue flowing through new channels in the medieval world to come, adapting and evolving. While the Western Roman Empire faded into history, its eastern counterpart continued to thrive, preserving the flame of Roman legacy. The citizens of this surviving realm never called themselves Byzantine, a term invented by modern historians. They proudly identified as Romans Romae, in their increasingly Greek speech, the rightful inheritors of Caesar and Constantine. For nearly a millennium after the deposition of Romulus Augustus, this Eastern Roman Empire would preserve and transform the legacy of Rome, a testament to its remarkable resilience. As the 5th century closed, Emperor Zeno faced significant challenges. Religious controversies over the nature of Christ divided Eastern Christians, while Isaurian countrymen from Zeno's mountainous homeland dominated the court, breeding resentment among Constantinople's population. Yet the empire remained intact with efficient tax collection, professional administration, and military security that the fragmented West could only envy. Zeno's successor, Anastasius, provided 27 years of capable governance, a period of much-needed stability. His careful financial stewardship replenished the treasury, while his construction of the Long Walls significantly protected Constantinople's landward approaches, bolstering its defenses. Though religious tensions continued during his reign, Anastasius skillfully maintained the empire's position against Sassanid Persia, its traditional and formidable rival in the east. The golden age of the Eastern Roman Empire truly arrived with the accession of Justinian I. Born to Latin-speaking peasants in the Balkan provinces, Justinian married the remarkable Theodora, whose journey from actress of questionable reputation to imperial consort scandalized conservative circles, but brought a shrewd and determined partner to the throne. Justinian's ambition was nothing less than the restoration of imperial unity, a grand vision of a reunited Rome. He dispatched his brilliant general Belisarius to recover North Africa from the Vandals. Belisarius accomplished this mission with remarkable speed and efficiency, returning the wealthy, grain-producing region to imperial control. Emboldened by this stunning success, Justinian authorized the invasion of Ostrogothic Italy. The Italian campaign, however, proved far more difficult and protracted than anticipated. What was planned as a swift reconquest became a 20-year struggle that utterly devastated the peninsula. Though imperial forces eventually prevailed, capturing Ravenna and defeating the last Gothic resistance, the cost was enormous. Italy, once the very heart of Roman power, lay economically ruined, a shadow of its former self. Parts of Spain were also recovered, but Justinian's grand dream of full Western restoration remained elusive, ultimately beyond reach. These ambitious military campaigns stretched imperial resources, already strained by ongoing war with Persia. The situation worsened dramatically when bubonic plague reached Constantinople, killing perhaps 40% of the city's inhabitants and spreading throughout the Mediterranean basin. This demographic catastrophe severely reduced tax revenues and military recruitment, creating fiscal problems that would plague Justinian's successors for centuries. Despite these immense challenges, Justinian's reign witnessed remarkable and enduring achievements. The magnificent church of Hagia Sophia, with its revolutionary dome spanning 108 feet, remains one of the world's architectural marvels, a testament to Byzantine ingenuity. Even more enduring was the Corpus Juris Civilis, a comprehensive compilation and reform of Roman law that meticulously preserved classical legal principles for future generations. This unparalleled legal code would eventually form the basis of many European legal systems and represents one of Rome's most significant and lasting legacies to the modern world. After Justinian's death, the empire entered a difficult and tumultuous period. His successor Justin I lost much of Italy to the Lombards, while relentless warfare with Persia continued to drain precious resources. Subsequent emperors, Tiberius I and Maurice, bravely maintained imperial defenses, but struggled with diminishing resources and constant pressure. Maurice's attempts to reform the military, however, lead to his tragic overthrow and execution by the usurper Phocas, plunging the empire into further instability. The 7th century brought unprecedented challenges to the empire, threatening its very existence. Under Shah Khosrow II, Persia launched massive invasions, capturing Syria, Palestine, Egypt, and much of Anatolia, territories that had been Roman for centuries. Jerusalem fell, and the true cross, the most sacred of Christian relics, was carried to the Persian capital as a trophy, a profound humiliation for Christendom. Persian forces even reached the Bosporus, opposite Constantinople itself, menacing the capital. In this moment of supreme crisis, emerged one of Rome's greatest emperors, Heraclius. Heraclius, who had bravely overthrown the tyrant Phocas, personally led the imperial counterattack. In a series of brilliant campaigns, he drove deep into Persian territory, forcing a peace that restored all lost provinces and the sacred True Cross, a stunning reversal that appeared to secure Rome's eastern frontier permanently. Yet even as Heraclius celebrated his triumph, a new and unstoppable power was emerging in the Arabian desert. United by the Prophet Muhammad and inspired by the new faith of Islam, Arab armies erupted into Roman and Persian territories with astonishing speed and ferocity. The exhausted Persian Empire collapsed entirely under the onslaught, while Roman forces suffered a crushing defeat at the decisive Battle of Yarmouk. Within a single decade, Syria, Palestine, and Egypt, provinces that had been Roman for over 6 centuries, fell irrevocably under Islamic rule, a catastrophic loss that permanently reshaped the Mediterranean world. This catastrophic loss of territory profoundly transformed the empire. The remaining realm became more compact, centered on Constantinople, Western Asia Minor, and the Southern Balkans, a leaner but more focused entity. Greek definitively replaced Latin as the language of administration, while the empire took on a more explicitly Christian character, shedding its remaining pagan vestiges. Modern historians often mark this 7th-century transformation as the transition from the Eastern Roman to the Byzantine Empire, though contemporaries saw no such division. Despite these massive territorial losses, the empire remarkably adapted and survived. The theme system, reorganizing provinces into military districts where soldier-farmers defended their own lands, proved an effective response to constant Arab raids. Greek fire, a mysterious incendiary weapon that could burn even on water, gave imperial fleets a crucial advantage in defending Constantinople's maritime approaches. When Arab forces besieged Constantinople itself on 2 separate occasions, the formidable defenses held firm, repelling the relentless attacks. The failure of these sieges marked a pivotal turning point, preserving the empire as a Christian bulwark in the eastern Mediterranean and, by extension, saving much of Europe from Islamic conquest. The 8th and early 9th centuries brought controversial internal disputes over religious imagery, known as the iconoclastic period. Emperors from Leo II to Theophilus banned the veneration of icons, viewing them as dangerously close to idol worship. This divisive policy split society and strained relations, with Rome and other Western Christians who continued to revere sacred images. The eventual restoration of icons, however, healed these internal divisions and ushered in a period of cultural and intellectual revival. Under the Macedonian dynasty, founded by Basil I, the empire regained its strength and reasserted its influence. Agricultural production increased, cities revived, and military fortunes dramatically improved. Emperors like Nike PH or OSP, HOK as in John Itzim is KES, recaptured territories in Syria, while Basil I earned the formidable sobriquet Bulgar Slayer for his ruthless campaigns that brought all the Balkans under imperial rule, a true testament to renewed strength. This resurgent Rome, albeit Greek in language and culture, represented the most powerful, wealthy, and sophisticated society in the Christian world. Constantinople, with perhaps 500,000 inhabitants, dwarfed the modest towns of Western Europe. Its vibrant markets featured exotic goods from as far as China and Scandinavia. Its churches gleamed with breathtaking mosaics, and its scholars meticulously preserved ancient texts unknown in the West, acting as a crucial cultural repository. Yet beneath this golden facade, structural weaknesses were slowly developing. The free peasantry that had formed the backbone of the theme armies gradually lost land to expanding aristocratic estates, undermining military recruitment. Civil service positions increasingly became hereditary rather than merit-based, leading to inefficiency and corruption. Religious differences with the Latin West widened, culminating in the Great Schism that irrevocably divided Christianity into Catholic and Orthodox branches, a profound and lasting split. The pivotal disaster came at Manzikert, where Seljuk Turks decisively defeated Emperor Romanos IV Iogenes and, tragically, opened Anatolia, the empire's heartland, to Turkish settlement, a devastating territorial loss. Simultaneously, Normans conquered the last imperial possessions in Italy, and Pechenegs raided across the Danube, putting pressure on multiple fronts. The empire that had seemed triumphant just decades earlier now fought desperately for survival. The desperate appeal for Western aid by Emperor Alexios Psyche-Omenes, a shrewd and capable ruler, helped trigger the First Crusade. While Crusaders did establish states in the Holy Land, the journey itself fostered deep-seated tensions between Latins and Greeks, growing increasingly bitter and distrustful. The Fourth Crusade, a monumental betrayal, famously diverted to Constantinople itself, sacking the greatest Christian city in the world and establishing a short-lived Latin empire on its sacred ruins, a wound that would never truly heal. Though imperial forces eventually recaptured Constantinople under Michael V. I Palaiologos, the restored empire was but a shadow of its former self, weakened and fractured. Italian merchant republics dominated its economy, while Serbian and Bulgarian states carved away Balkan territories, further diminishing its reach. Most importantly, Turkish emirates controlled most of Anatolia, with the aggressive Ottoman state rapidly emerging as the greatest and most formidable threat to the very existence of the empire. The Ottoman Turks relentlessly crossed into Europe, gradually encircling Constantinople. Despite desperate diplomatic efforts to secure Western aid, support proved minimal, a bitter disappointment. Emperor Constantine X I Palaiologos, the last Roman emperor, faced the massive Ottoman army of Sultan Mehmed I with only a few thousand valiant defenders when the final, agonizing siege began in April. For 7 weeks, the ancient, formidable walls of Constantinople heroically withstood Ottoman cannon fire, defying the relentless assault. On May 29th, the final, overwhelming assault broke through. Constantine XI, the last emperor of Rome, allegedly threw off his imperial regalia and died fighting alongside his soldiers as the city fell. Mehmed II, the conqueror, rode triumphantly to Hagia Sophia, which became a mosque that very same day, forever altering its destiny. The Roman Empire, which had endured for an astonishing 1480 years since the accession of Augustus, finally ended. Its long, unglorious chapter closed. Yet its legacy lived on in myriad forms. The Ottoman sultans themselves styled themselves as Caesars of Rome, ruling much of the former Byzantine territory, recognizing the power of the title. Moscow claimed the mantle of the Third Rome, preserving Orthodox Christianity and imperial traditions, carrying the torch eastward. Renaissance Italy rediscovered classical texts meticulously preserved by Byzantine scholars who fled west before and after Constantinople's fall, sparking a cultural rebirth. Most significantly, the Byzantine Empire had served as the crucial bridge between the ancient and medieval worlds. It preserved Roman law, Greek philosophy, and early Christian theology through centuries when these might otherwise have been lost to the tides of time. Its elaborate diplomacy, sophisticated bureaucracy, and complex economy provided models far beyond its borders, influencing nascent European states. The epic story that began with Romulus on the Palatine Hill had finally concluded, but Rome never truly fell. It transformed. As you drift towards sleep, imagine the echoes of Roman civilization continuing through the laws we follow, the languages we speak, the buildings we admire, and countless other aspects of our world that would be utterly unrecognizable without the enduring, indelible legacy of Rome. Though the last emperor bearing the title of Caesar fell with Constantinople in 1453, Rome's influence echoes through the centuries to our present day. As you drift closer to sleep, let us reflect on the enduring legacy of this remarkable civilization that shaped our world in countless, profound ways. Perhaps Rome's most significant contribution lies in the realm of law and governance. The Romans developed a sophisticated legal system that moved beyond the limited scope of earlier codes to address the complex needs of a diverse, cosmopolitan society. Concepts we take for granted: the presumption of innocence, the importance of intent in criminal acts, the distinction between civil and criminal law all bear unmistakable Roman fingerprints. Justinian's great legal compilation, the Corpus Juris Civilis, meticulously preserved these principles through the medieval period and into the modern era, a vital bridge of knowledge. When European nations developed their legal systems in the late medieval and early modern periods, they drew heavily on this Roman inheritance. Today, the civil law tradition that governs most of continental Europe, Latin America, and parts of Africa and Asia arrives directly from Roman models. Even the common law tradition of England and its former colonies, while developing separately, absorbed many fundamental Roman concepts. Beyond specific legal provisions, Rome pioneered practices of public administration that would profoundly influence later states. The Romans created a professional civil service, systematic record keeping, standardized weights and measures, regular censuses, and sophisticated tax systems. While these innovations might seem mundane, they formed the essential infrastructure that allowed complex societies to function effectively. The very idea of citizenship, a formal legal status conferring specific rights and responsibilities, owes much to Roman practice. Rome's gradual extension of citizenship to conquered peoples offered a pragmatic path to integration that helped sustain the empire for centuries, a model of earned inclusion. In the realm of language and literature, Rome's impact remains inescapable, woven into the very fabric of our communication. Latin, the speech of rustic farmers on the Tiber's banks, became the lingua franca of Western civilization for over a millennium, bridging vast cultural divides. Though no longer spoken as a first language, Latin's vibrant descendants, the Romance languages including Spanish, Portuguese, French, Italian, and Romanian are native tongues for nearly 1 billion people today, a testament to its enduring power. Even languages not directly descended from Latin bear its profound influence through centuries of borrowing. English, though Germanic in its basic structure, derives roughly 60% of its vocabulary from Latin, either directly or through French, showcasing its deep roots. Scientific, legal, and technical terminology throughout the world remains predominantly Latin-based, providing a common, precise vocabulary across linguistic boundaries, a universal language of knowledge. Roman literature established forms and themes that would resonate through Western literary tradition for millennia. Virgil's epic Aeneid became a touchstone for later poets from Dante to Milton, its narrative echoing through the ages. Ovid's inventive mythological narratives in the Metamorphoses influenced Shakespeare and countless other writers, inspiring new creative pathways. Cicero's powerful rhetoric provided enduring models for political oratory, shaping the art of persuasion, while Seneca's profound philosophical works and tragedies shaped Renaissance drama, exploring the depths of human nature. The elegant letters of Pliny the Younger and the incisive histories of Tacitus continued to influence how we understand the purpose and methods of these genres, setting standards for centuries of writers. The physical legacy of Rome remains equally impressive, a tangible testament to their ingenuity. Roman engineering transformed the Mediterranean landscape with an infrastructure network of unprecedented scale and sophistication. Many Roman roads still form the basis of modern highways, their carefully planned routes proving optimal even with today's technology. A marvel of foresight. Aqueducts built by Roman engineers continued to supply vital water to cities like Segovia in Spain into the 20th century, their enduring functionality a testament to their construction. Roman architectural innovations, particularly their masterful refinement of the arch, vault, and dome, made possible buildings of scale and permanence previously unimaginable. Their groundbreaking development of concrete allowed for structures that have endured to millennia of earthquakes, floods, and warfare. The Pantheon in Rome, with its perfect dome featuring an oculus open to the sky, remains one of the world's architectural marvels, inspiring buildings from the Renaissance to the present day. In military affairs, Rome's legacy is similarly profound, shaping the very art of warfare. The legion, a flexible professional fighting force combining heavy infantry with specialized units, provided a model that would influence armed forces for centuries, a blueprint for military effectiveness. Roman emphasis on discipline, rigorous training, practical engineering, and meticulous logistics, rather than mere courage or numbers, set standards that later successful armies would relentlessly emulate. Military academies today still meticulously study Caesar's campaigns as unparalleled exemplars of strategic and tactical brilliance, their lessons enduring. Rome's political legacy presents a more complex, nuanced picture. The Republic, with its ingenious checks and balances, separation of powers, and term limits, profoundly influenced the framers of many modern constitutions, particularly America's founders, who sought to learn from Rome's successes and failures. Yet Rome also starkly demonstrated how republican institutions, however well designed, could be tragically subverted by ambitious individuals, and how liberty might, in times of crisis, be traded for the illusory promise of security and stability. The imperial system that replaced the republic similarly offered both positive and negative lessons for later generations. At its best, The Roman Empire provided good governance, security, and prosperity to diverse populations across 3 continents, fostering an era of relative peace. At its worst, it demonstrated the insidious dangers of autocracy, the corrupting influence of absolute power, and the inherent challenges of maintaining unity across vast territories and vastly different cultures. Christianity, the world's largest religion, owes its global spread to the unique Roman context in which it developed. Early Christians skillfully utilized Roman roads, ships, and urban networks to disseminate their message, a strategic advantage. After Constantine's conversion, the imperial administrative framework provided a template for ecclesiastical organization, with dioceses often corresponding to Roman provincial boundaries. Even the sacred title of Pontifex Maximus, once held by Roman emperors as chief priests of the state religion, passed to the popes who lead the Catholic Church, a striking continuity of power and prestige. Rome's unparalleled cultural achievement lay not just in its original contributions, but in its genius for synthesis and transmission. Roman artists, philosophers, and scientists often adapted Greek models, but in doing so, they meticulously preserved untransmitted Greek achievements to later civilizations. Without Rome as intermediary, much of classical Greek thought might have been tragically lost to the Western tradition, fading into obscurity. The very idea of Rome itself became a powerful, enduring symbol long after the empire's political fall. Throughout the medieval and early modern periods, political leaders across Europe and beyond sought to claim the Roman mantle, yearning for its legitimacy and grandeur. Charlemagne's coronation as Roman emperor in 800, the Byzantine ruler's steadfast identity as Romii, the Russian Tsars claimed to be heirs of the Third Rome, and the sprawling Habsburg Holy Roman Empire all powerfully reflect Rome's potent symbolic legacy, its magnetic pull. Even Nazi architecture and Mussolini's fascist imagery consciously evoked Roman imperial grandeur, showing the persistent, if sometimes dangerously misused, power of Roman symbolism and its ability to inspire. Though imperfectly realized in practice, this Roman ideal of a world brought together under law and common citizenship, rather than divided by ethnic or religious boundaries, remains a powerful and inspiring aspiration in our own increasingly interconnected global society. Rome also demonstrated with breathtaking clarity both the dizzying heights humanity can achieve and the terrifying depths to which it can sink. The same civilization that produced the profound wisdom of Marcus Aurelius also featured the monstrous excesses of Caligula. The society that brilliantly built the majestic pantheon also staged the brutal, bloody gladiatorial games. This complex, often contradictory, legacy reminds us that human achievements are always inextricably mixed with human failings, that civilization itself is always both inspiring and deeply flawed. As you fall deeper into sleep, imagine how fundamentally different our world would be without Rome's enduring influence. Our legal systems and languages, our architecture and engineering, our political institutions and religious organizations, all would be profoundly transformed without the indelible Roman experience. The Roman story, spanning more than 2 millennia from Romulus to the fall of Constantinople, offers a grand epic of human achievement, unparalleled resilience, and remarkable adaptation. Through rises and falls, triumphs and disasters, the Roman world relentlessly evolved while maintaining deep connections to its foundational past. Even after the empire ceased to exist as a political entity, its majestic shadow continued to influence everything that followed. As you drift off to sleep, take comfort in this profound continuity of human experience. The same stars that shone over Augustus as he transformed Rome from brick to marble now shine on us. The same human hopes, fears, and dreams that motivated Romans for security, prosperity, meaning, and beauty motivate us still. In that shared humanity lies perhaps Rome's most profound and everlasting legacy of all.